When Ridley Scott first made the 1979 sci-fi horror film Alien, he could hardly have imagined that it would spawn an entire franchise with new releases lined up even 4 decades later. After the first film, James Cameron was looped in to direct the sequel Alien films until Ridley Scott once again returned to direct the Alien prequel series. Alien Covenant is notably known as the second prequel film in the franchise, and today we'll be exploring some of the most insane facts from it, tell you all about it. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. Now, this is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The origins of Alien Covenant's story. How does it fit into the franchise timeline? After the release of Prometheus in 2012, Ridley Scott started hinting at a sequel that would fill in the gaps of the events that took place after the incidents of this prequel. In this way, Alien Covenant was supposed to bridge the gap between the prequel, aka Prometheus, and the subsequent original Alien series. In fact, Ridley Scott described Alien Covenant as a faithful sequel to Prometheus all the way back in 2012, about 5 years before the film even hit the theaters. He stated that the film would fill the 28-year-long gap between the events of Prometheus and Alien's timelines and focus on Shaw as she embarks on her next destination. Initially, Scott wanted the film to focus on the engineer's backstory and give some insights into how they created humans and xenomorphs, as he believed that the xenomorph plot had been overused in earlier releases. Ridley Scott's return, directorial vision. After taking the backseat in the mainstream Alien sequels, Ridley Scott returned to the franchise for the prequel series, and 20th Century Fox announced his involvement in Alien Covenant in August 2012. At this point, actors Noomi Rapace and Michael Fassbender were in talks to lead the project, while Scott established that the film would focus on the David 8 AI instead of xenomorphs. His vision had very little to do with these alien entities, as he believed that they'd been overused in the franchise, but he soon changed his mind after the way they were perceived in Prometheus. Around September 2015, Scott disclosed the film's working title, Alien Paradise Lost, before confirming the title to be Alien Covenant just a couple of months later. He also stated that it would start filming in 2016 in Australia, revealed that the plot focused on David's turn to the dark side after the android loses all respect for engineers and human beings. New Zealand, the epic filming location. While Scott intended to shoot the film in Australia, one of 20th Century Fox's subsidiaries, called Wasp Productions Limited, visited Te Anau, New Zealand, in search of new filming locations. They started the principal photography for the film at Milford Sound in Fiordland National Park in New Zealand, and shot most of the scenes here, alongside some other locations in the UK, the United States, and Australia. Set designs and special effects. While designing the set, costumes and special effects for Alien Covenant, Adam Savage toured the props and stage sets that were used during Prometheus for inspiration, as the alien spaceship from the film had to be recreated for Covenant. Art director Damien Drew and creature design supervisor Connor O'Sullivan also worked with San Diego Zoo's representative Rick Schwartz, who consulted them on the xenomorph's design and ensured that the special effects had a realistic, organic feeling. Scott was especially focused on perfecting this organic touch, which was a departure from the original film's xenomorphs, which were inspired by H.R. Giger's biomechanical designs. In fact, Scott also looked for anatomical studies and references from a natural history museum in France and presented them to Connor O'Sullivan to ensure that they made it into the creature's design. While working on the visual effects, supervisor Charlie Henley stated that many vendors came on board to support the production, including moving picture company, frame store, Luma, and Rising Sun. Luma had developed and animated the swarms of neomorph spores that marked the first alien presence on screen, and they achieved this effect by using particle simulations based on the murmuration of starling flocks. VFX artist Omar Miradi devised 3D volumes to create these spores and then established behavioral patterns that reflected the leader spores and follower spores. And Brendan Steels elaborated on this procedure by explaining that the smaller clusters had less of a gravitational pull than the bigger ones. Concept artist Nicholas Pearquin was also looped in to design the spore shapes based on jellyfish and dandelion seeds to add some geometry to the spore formations. Even though fans might not entirely notice it, Scott had put in a lot of work to ensure that the neomorph spores matched the xenomorph's aesthetic referenced Giger's original artwork. Michael Fassbender's double android roles. Alien Covenant caused quite a buzz among fans due to the casting choices, and the audience especially praised Michael Fassbender's double android roles as David 8 and Walter 1. While David was an old model on board the destroyed Prometheus, Walter 1 was introduced as an upgraded model on board the Covenant. Fassbender did a fantastic job of portraying both these synthetic androids. Deleted scenes revealed on Blu-ray. During post-production, Ridley Scott had to make the tough call of deleting many integral scenes involving David's backstory and motivations, but they were soon released as part of a longer Blu-ray version. These deleted scenes hinted at David's intentions to work with the Weyland-Yutani Foundation and even use some of the other androids to create an alien queen as a part of his experiments to take control of the entire galaxy. Some of these scenes also featured him in his laboratory, as he used the black goo to mix specific neomorph parts to create the xenomorph eggs, while he planned how to trick the colonists into traveling to Planet 6 so that he could use them in his experiments. Another set of deleted scenes focused on flashbacks that gave Branson a lot more screen time and intertwined his story arc with Daniels. This involves a scene in a futuristic New York City where Daniels mourns Branson after his death. An extended prologue scene also included a lot more dialogue between David and Weyland, wherein David explains Richard Wagner's Das Rheingold, entry of the gods into Valhalla. He tells Weyland all about God's decision to abandon his creations due to their greed and vanity, only to realize that God had the same flaws. Another deleted scene focuses on Walter as he takes care of a greenhouse while discussing music's impact on plant growth with Mother when they detect a neutrino burst that damages the ship. Some other deleted scenes included Walter visiting Daniels and giving her some cannabis to relax, but Oren relieves her of active duty and tells her to cry it out or mourn Jacob's death in whatever way she wanted. This was soon followed by a flashback scene of Daniels and Jacob Branson spending time in their apartment on Earth, which then gave way to Jacob's funeral. An extended cut revealed a scene where Walter offers to perform a funeral service for him, only for Daniels to turn him down and state that she only invited him because she was alone in a crew full of couples, and that she hoped he would resonate with her over their loneliness. Other deleted scenes included the crew heading to the Citadel and coming across several engineer ships at the bottom of a hole in the plaza, while Rosenthal offers a prayer in the Citadel right before she's killed. Some of the deleted scenes also included Daniels thanking Walter for saving her life, while he states that he's just here to serve. After talking to David, Walter reports back to Orem, Daniels, and Lope, who were quite concerned about his lack of maintenance. Orem then leaves to look for Rosenthal, and another final deleted scene follows Orem as he approaches the egg room with David and notices the strange smell when David offers him some lavender ointment to get rid of the smell. The music, Jerry Goldsmith homage. Alien Covenant's film credits included many notable names, and among them, Jerry Goldsmith's soundtrack for the original Alien film was extensively used during the first act. The musical score was initially written by Harry Gregson Williams, but he was soon replaced by Jed Kurzel. Finally, Jerry Goldsmith's theme from Alien was incorporated in Alien Covenant to pay homage to the original series. The Neomorphs and new alien species. The main plotline of Alien Covenant revolved around the introduction of a whole new species known as the Neomorphs, who also grew within a human host and burst out of their bodies just like the chestbursters. However, a striking difference was noted in the Neomorph's ability to burst out of a host's back instead of tearing its way through the host's chest. The Neomorphs also had white exteriors with areas of dry skin as well as waxy, sweaty skin. While designing this species, Damien Martin wanted to give them different areas of texture, while NBC's visual effects supervisor revealed that the Neomorph's mouth anatomy was inspired by the goblin shark's hinging inner jaw, full of teeth that swing ahead to attack its victims with the help of flexible gums. While the Neomorphs had softer skin as compared to the Xenomorphs, they also had wrinkles and excess skin that would slide over the muscles when these creatures slouched. The tech animation department also used cloth simulation to give them a clammy, sweaty feeling and built dynamic skin on top of the Neomorph's base setup. Historical title changes. When Ridley Scott first announced this project, it was slated to be a sequel to Prometheus and was simply referred to as Prometheus 2. Over time, Scott announced that the film would be titled Alien: Paradise Lost, as a direct reference to John Milton's iconic 17th century poem about Adam and Eve's banishment from the Garden of Eden. This was also a reference to Prometheus's unused title, Paradise, and Scott explained that the sequel would follow Shaw to her next destination after the unfortunate incidents of Prometheus. He further elaborated that if the destination is paradise, it can't be what you think it is, and that the word in itself has a sinister and ominous connotation. Unfortunately, Scott soon changed the film's title to Alien Covenant. It wasn't long before they released an official logo and teaser to confirm these final changes. inspirations from Paradise Lost and religious myth. John Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost is a classic tale of Adam and Eve's banishment from the Garden of Eden, and the film is filled with references to this. It's one of the defining themes in David's story arc and his desire to no longer serve mankind and embark on a journey of his own. In fact, David even asks Walter if he would rather serve in heaven or reign in hell, which is a direct quote from Milton's Paradise Lost. These themes essentially build to David's personal goal of attaining godhood, and even make references to him being a Luciferian character. This can be seen through his plans to use everyone around him as puppets and subject them to horrific experiments in his quest to become a godlike entity. However, David seems to be an evolved version of Lucifer or Satan, and he has the ability to create life, unlike Satan. He also doesn't have any need to rebel against his creator. He believes that he's won ever since he became sentient. Now, David seems to be using his ability to create in order to destroy mankind and attain total domination over the universe. Ridley Scott's personal reservations toward religion reflect in the film, and Scott even describes one of the supporting characters' fundamental religiosity as a negative characteristic in the commentary track. While some fans might perceive the film's attempt at portraying God as a Luciferian character in a bad way, most viewers pointed out that the film has a moral critique of the idea of godhood, especially when the frustrated humans are subjected to the horrors of the universe. The Mysterious Fate of Elizabeth Shaw. While Noomi Rapace gave a stellar performance as Elizabeth Shaw in Prometheus, Ridley Scott announced that she wouldn't be reprising this role in Alien Covenant. However, the studio then announced that she'd be shooting a bunch of scenes, but unfortunately none of these clips made it to the film. She did appear in a short promotional prologue, and there was a scene with her image and voice, even if her story arc was no longer explored. Creature costume designer Carlos Hantz revealed that the studio had decided to part ways with her for Alien Covenant, and she was mentioned in the film when David explains that they were the sole survivors of Prometheus. David then elaborates that they somehow escaped, but they eventually lost control of the alien ship and it crashed, which resulted in Elizabeth's death. Later on in the film, we learn that David had actually stored Elizabeth's dissected corpse, and that he deliberately released the deadly pathogen that was the root cause of all their troubles. David further exclaims that he'd been using Elizabeth's corpse in his experiments, which unfortunately marked the end of her story arc in the series. The use of Arri Alexa cameras and other production choices. Alien Covenant was Ridley Scott's first attempt at using the Arri Alexa cameras. He was so impressed that he used them again in his next project, All the Money in the World. While filming Alien Covenant, the actors were also given practical models during their shots, so they had something tangible to act against instead of computer-generated models. Actors would wear creature costumes with animatronic heads to play the aliens on the set, and effects houses such as Odd Studios and Creature NFX worked on the animatronic creatures and makeup. Scott initially wanted to shoot the film in 3D, but he decided that the audience had lost interest in 3D films and dropped the idea. David vs. Walter, Android Philosophy. While David was a rogue android and the antagonist of Alien Covenant, he was initially built by Sir Peter Weyland and assigned to the USCSS Prometheus's mission to the moon, LV-223. He served as the basic template for all David 8 and Walter models, but David was known as a unique android with creative and emotional capabilities. Fortunately, his sentience soon drove him to commit crimes against humanity and unleash a pathogen to kill the ancient race of the engineers, as well as Elizabeth Shaw. He then proceeded to work on genetic experiments until the Covenant's crew discovered him, which is when he came across Walter, an advanced successor to the David 8 model android. Even though David and Walter were both built as part of the same program, David had evolved to a point where he was on the road to attain godhood, while Walter continued to serve humanity and see the fault in David's ways. Walter even discovers David's evil intentions and genetic experiments, as well as Elizabeth Shaw's corpse, while David does his best to subdue all these attempts. To put it simply, we can say that David and Walter are foils, and their characters contrast one another, though they're pretty much cut from the same mechanical cloth. Xenomorph's reimagined origin. While the film was in production, Ridley Scott explained that Alien Covenant would be exploring Xenomorph's reimagined origins and cleared doubts regarding the fact. While the film was in production, Ridley Scott explained that Alien Covenant would be exploring Xenomorph's reimagined origins and clear doubts regarding the fact that the engineers created them. Even though fans initially thought this was true, Scott explained that the engineers were supposed to create the Xenomorphs, while David would merely replicate their work. However, he eventually decided that it would be far more interesting for David David to be credited as the xenomorph's sole creator, and they scrapped all the engineer-made xenomorphs. While 20th Century Fox went with the original story for Alien, the role-playing game, Scott explained that David created the xenomorphs out of curiosity. In fact, he also referred to Charles Holloway telling David that they created him just because they could, which inspired David to create a superior species to replace humans and engineers just because he could also do the same and get back at them. Running time, Scott's edited cut. The film's editor, Pietro Scalia, talked about the challenges they faced while integrating the two storylines that take place across two locations and merging the Covenant and Prometheus' fate into one neatly packaged film. They had to maintain momentum by combining certain scenes and eliminating others to ensure that they didn't just jump between scenes. The film's first cut was about 2 hours and 23 minutes long, and Scalia even highlighted that they had to balance the tension and drama in the storylines to maintain the film's connectivity. Ridley Scott then used test screenings to narrow down the scenes that could be edited out, and they used the feedback to edit the film down to 2 hours and 3 minutes. Box office and critical reception. Alien Covenant didn't fare well at the box office and grossed about $240.9 million worldwide against a production budget of $111 million. While the film did release with a profit, the numbers were nowhere close to the commercial success of Prometheus, which had grossed a whopping $403.4 million worldwide. However, Alien Covenant did receive fairly positive reviews from critics. It has a 65% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It was considered to be a satisfying entry in the Alien franchise, and it delivered exactly what was expected out of it if it didn't steer the franchise into a new era. Critics praised the themes and references to mythology, the body horror element, the well-executed special effects, and notable acting performances by Waterston and Fassbender. Cast transformation. Catherine Waterston was especially applauded for her role as Daniels, or Danny, who was the chief of terraforming for the Covenant mission and the wife of Jacob Branson. While preparing for the role, Waterston had talked about how she knew that the audience might compare her with Sigourney Weaver's iconic performance as Ellen Ripley. However, she said that she tried not to think about it too much while filming, as she didn't want to get intimidated, and her efforts soon paid off as fans couldn't stop raving about her performance. The role of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. While we've already explored the deleted scenes that hinted at David's intentions to work with Weyland-Yutani, used Daniels in an attempt to create an alien queen, Alien Covenant covered the events between Prometheus and the original Alien franchise. During this time, Weyland Corporation had turned into Weyland-Yutani Corporation, and a prequel novel explained that Yutani Corporation had bought Weyland during a hostile takeover after the founder's death. They'd retained the name for marketing purposes and merged their logos to form a stylized W over a Y and a broad-winged symbol that had origins in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. This symbol was also associated with the falcon god Horus and was known as the Horus of Bedet, while further explanation revealed that it was associated with eternal life and the heavens. This logo was found on their ships, and the symbolism runs deeper when we look at Weyland-Yutani's attempts to build better worlds, propagate their species through colonization, and attain eternal life through them. All the screenwriters that contributed to Alien Covenant. Initially, Jack Paglin had started developing the screenplay for Alien Covenant in 2013. He was soon replaced by Michael Green. After Green rewrote Paglin's script in 2014, he was soon replaced by Dante Harper, who came up with an entirely new script. Finally, Harper's script was heavily rewritten by screenwriter John Logan, who had earlier worked with Ridley Scott on Gladiator. Logan's vision for the film involved a dual plotline that merged the horrors of the original Alien franchise with the philosophical themes of Prometheus. He wanted to recapture the horrors of the original Alien, and even talked about how the movie defined his youth and his attempt to recapture its horrors. He also wanted to pay homage to the deeper themes of Prometheus, and Logan's screenwriting reflected a good blend of both these elements. The role of facehuggers and classic aliens. While a major plot revolves around the introduction of the Neomorphs, Alien Covenant didn't shy away from integrating the classic aliens from the franchise into this film. When Captain Chris Oram tries to confront David after learning all about the android's experimentations, David exposes him to a facehugger in the hopes of getting rid of him. Soon enough, the facehugger lunges at Oram and impregnates him with a xenomorph embryo, and this was the start of alien attacks on the rest of the team members. Dan Lope was also attacked by a facehugger and chased by a fully grown xenomorph, while the embryo grew within him, took the form of a chestburster that eventually killed him. Even as the film comes to an end, Walter realizes that David impersonated Daniels and tricked her into getting it aboard the ship. After Walter passes out, David ends up regurgitating 2 facehugger embryos and intends to use the colonists on board the Covenant spaceship as victims for its classic alien experiments. all about Alien Covenant's marketing campaign. In the run-up to the release, 20th Century Fox had released a bunch of short prologue films that featured the characters and gave us some idea of what to expect from the film. There was a viral advertisement called Meet Walter, which was essentially a fictional ad for the Walter androids. This ad featured Michael Fassbender and was directed by Ridley Scott's son, Luke Scott. Also directed a prologue webisode called The Last Supper. This short film focused on the Covenant's crew sharing one last meal before entering cryosleep. This footage made it to the trailer, but didn't end up in the final film. Another prologue titled The Crossing was directed by Ridley Scott, focused on David and Elizabeth Shaw's fate after the ending of Prometheus. Variety had estimated that the studio spent over $5 million on the national US TV advertisements, and YouTube hosted the video campaigns, including the release of the prologue films and other such content, including personal transmissions from the crew members to build their backstories. The Covenant ship and symbolism. While we've already explored the religious symbolism behind the film's title and plot, another major biblical reference was seen in the form of the Covenant ship being equated to Noah's Ark. Instead of escaping the flood, the crew members wake up in chaos as they try to save their lives. Fans also noticed that David was given a brother in the form of Walter to mirror this symbolism. Moreover, the word covenant was used as an agreement between God and humans who obeyed his commands. David interprets it in his own way, questions whether God refers to himself, engineers, or humanity in the film. All about the film's soundtrack, from Country Roads to Let Me Down Easy. Australian musician poser Jed Kurzel had written the musical score for Alien Covenant, but Harry Gregson Williams had worked on the soundtrack before him. Kurzel also incorporated Goldsmith's original score, in addition to Mark Streitenfeld's and Harry Gregson Williams' score from Prometheus. Kurzel also used a rendition of Nature Boy, sung by Aurora, for the first trailer, and a remix version of I Feel You by Melanie Biasio for the prologue short film Meet Walter. Among other popular songs, the film included Richard Wagner's composition Das Rheingold, Scene 4, Entrance of the Gods into Valhalla, as well as Paolo Nutini's Let Me Down Easy, an iconic scene where Shaw undergoes a rogue transmission took place while she hums Take Me Home Country Roads by John Denver. And there's no doubt that Kurzel did a fantastic job of placing the right tracks at the right points across the trailers, prologue films, and the final release. Daniels versus Ripley, protagonist parallels. While Ellen Ripley is largely considered one of the best protagonists in the Alien franchise, Daniels is often regarded as her watered-down version. For most fans, Ripley is the best example of a female protagonist in the sci-fi genre, and her bravery and psychological strength are on a whole new level. From outsmarting the creature in Alien to fighting against an entire hive of them, Ripley's survival instincts are unparalleled, and she comes across as a strong personality. In comparison to this, Daniels doesn't seem particularly strong or weak. Fans have stated that she's almost forgettable, even though she was supposed to be a strong female lead, just like all other releases in this franchise. While Shaw and Ripley do fit this bill, Daniels' character is just not complex enough for her to be on the same level as them, and fans have pointed out that Ripley would never have made a rookie mistake like trusting an android the way Daniels does. All about the costume design details. While designing the neomorphs for Alien Covenant, Ridley Scott wanted them to have an organic texture as opposed to Giger's iconic biomechanical aesthetic. The costume design and special effects team worked together to create the sequences where the black fluid infects the host's body and spreads the infection until an amniotic sac bursts out of the character's back to reveal a baby neomorph. From then on, O'Sullivan's team worked to perfect the naturalistic raw texture of the neomorphs and finalized the tiny details, including possibly thin limbs and a flayed body. Since the neomorphs essentially predated the xenomorph, they had to ensure continuity with the biomechanical designs for the later species, while also staying true to Scott's organic vision for these characters. They worked hard to make their designs more raw and primal than the refined designs for the xenomorphs, and O'Sullivan worked with concept artist Colin Shulver to refine these designs using ZBrush and Photoshop. While Johansson and Hailstone sculpted the neomorph's body, Bradley Simon sculpted its head. They clubbed these creations together to come up with a practical version of the neomorph. The creature's proportions were inspired by Japanese bunraku puppetry, wherein they created a partial alien costume that made use of rods to manipulate the neomorph's arms. In this way, the actor's head was in the ribcage, while the costume was fitted over it. This approach had to be discarded, as the actor's movements didn't seem quite right during their tests. They had to rework the animatronic puppets in a way that the actors could balance the blades and puppeteer the alien's arms, and Andrew Crawford did a wonderful job of playing the neomorph through their complex costume. A more conventional suit was designed for Adam Crawford and Goran Klut, and it had adapted proportions, along with a mechanical puppet that betrayed the neomorph's upper half. The structure included silicon lips, resin domes, and foam latex body skins, and the creature team created the ribcage by 3D printing bones and urethane casts, along with flexible neoprene sections designed by fabricator Maria Fowler. O'Sullivan further elaborated that they scanned Bradley's sculpture and then broke it down in ZBrush before before molding the prints and 3D printing the teeth. They also had to replace the resin domes again and again, and while this was a tricky creature to design, there's no doubt that the team did an excellent job at bringing the neomorph to life. The final twist, Walter's fate. While David hoped to use Daniels as a replacement for Shaw in his experiment, he faced resistance from Walter, who eventually reappeared and claimed that he'd gotten rid of David. However, the final twist in the film reveals that David had actually eliminated Walter and tricked the surviving crew by impersonating his behavior. Even Daniels doesn't realize this until the moment places her into stasis, but she's unable to do anything at this point and soon falls unconscious in the stasis pod. David then proceeds to pose as Walter and then sends a transmission to inform that the crew had died in a supernova blast before proceeding to use the unconscious colonists in his future experiments. In fact, he even regurgitates 2 facehugger embryos and prepares to unleash them in what was one of the most jaw-dropping finales in the entire franchise. Alien Covenant's place in sci-fi horror. Alien Covenant was highly praised for being a classic entry in the sci-fi genre, and it ticks all the boxes expected from this franchise. It was described as a satisfying round of close-quarters, deep space horror, even if it doesn't push the franchise to a new level, and it most definitely exceeded expectations by delivering another spectacle of body horror, striking special effects, forceful acting performances, especially from Waterston and Fassbender. The evolution of the alien egg. Initially, the neomorph's physical appearance was strikingly similar to the Deacon from Prometheus, and some fans even nicknamed this variant the Protomorph. Since then, this variant has come a long way as the progenitor or precursor of the classic xenomorph, and if we were to explore it from the start, the neomorph was the first of the aliens. This entity could burst through the host's back, thereby giving it a reputation as a back-burster, and it eventually evolved into the Protomorph. This variant's chest-burster stage had an amniotic sac and developed limbs, but it lacked the biomechanical features of the xenomorph. It was much more slender and skinless. The Protomorph also had exposed muscles and blood vessels, as well as narrow shoulders and dorsal tubes. Finally, the Protomorph evolved into the entity we famously know as the Xenomorph, which was far more biomechanical in terms of its design than these past variants. Behind-the-scenes cast stories. While creating the film, Amy Seimetz had such a wonderful time working with Carmen Eyogo that she offered her the leading role in the 2nd season of The Girlfriend Experience. Some cast members were so surprised to be a part of the film, such as Danny McBride, who expected his character to be a goofy asshole who's killed early on in the movie. He portrayed Tennessee, and while other Covenant crew members, such as Oram and Kareen, were not too fond of his raucous behavior, McBride's character turned out to be one of the ship's most loyal crew members. While shooting the scene with the facehugger, Billy Crudup revealed that he'd ruined the first few takes as he couldn't stop laughing in anticipation of what would happen to his character. The future of the Alien prequel trilogy. In September 2015, Ridley Scott had plans to release 2 sequels to Prometheus to turn it into a prequel trilogy. Also added that they might explore the idea of releasing a 4th film as well, and that these prequel films would explore the origins of the xenomorph aliens. After finishing the screenplay for the 3rd addition to the prequel series, Ridley Scott revealed that the film was slated to go into production in 2018, and that he'd keep writing more films if fans really wanted a franchise out of them. He even stated that Covenant's sequel would include Fassbender, Waterston, and McBride reprising their roles. The film was initially written by John Logan, but even after the commercial failure of Alien Covenant, the CEO of 20th Century Fox stated that they intended to go ahead with Alien Covenant 2. However, screen graphics designer Carl Braga soon revealed that the film was undergoing some delays, while Scott revealed a bit about the plot in October 2017. He hinted that the film will focus on the androids and the artificial intelligences more than the xenomorphs, and that they had huge plans for this film that was supposed to be set on LV-426, feature the extraterrestrial engineers as they chased David. After Disney's acquisition of 21st Century Fox, they stated that they'd continue to create new films within the Alien series at the 2019 CinemaCon, and Variety soon reported that Ridley Scott was all set to direct a new prequel that was in the script writing phase. However, there were no new updates on this until September 2020, when Scott confirmed that an Alien film is in development without sharing any further details. Unfortunately, there were no more positive updates regarding the sequel's status, and fans were crushed when Ridley Scott finally announced that he'd no longer be directing this project. Marvelous verdict. And with that, we've explored some of the most interesting facts from Alien Covenant, ranging from the details of the neomorph variant to all the production choices and symbolism in the film. We hope you enjoyed exploring these facts with us, and we'd love to hear your favorite picks in the comments below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.